Hello, hello. Just get my mic closer because this thing is just does its own thing. Also, I was about to start the live and then I was like, oh, my mic isn't working as usual. I hadn't turned it on. So it turns out I have to actually turn the mic on if I want to use it. And here I am being like, oh, stupid mic. Every time. Oh goodness. Okay. Awesome. I am so excited about this topic. I think it's such a cool thing to do, especially towards the end of the year, but you can really do this at any time. Time is kind of arbitrary, right? We just have these periods of the year and then, this is the end of the year, but really we don't have to wait until, January to start something, or we don't have to wait until the end of the year to assess how it's gone this year. And you can also just assess at different periods of your life. One of the coaches I have really talks about evaluating a lot. And it has been so helpful because now I sort of just evaluate everything. Like that was specifically for coaching sessions, but this is more like I sort of take the concept and I apply it to other things as well. So if I have a goal, I will, evaluate how did it go. If I, wanted to do something different in my day, I will evaluate how did it go. I won't do like a formal evaluation every time I, do anything. But it's just a nice concept to have in my mind. And the way that she does it, part of it, I will also is what I'm going to be teaching today. But I'm just going to use kind of different tools for this. We're kind of going to look a little bit back at this year. I know the year's not over, but it's just to do it before things get a little bit crazy. And we can just kind of take a moment and look back at the year a little bit. And the main thing that I want to start with is just asking yourself the question, what am I most proud of this year? And you can, take it back to this time last year or just in general, if you think about your year, what are you most proud of? For me, if I answer this question, it's mainly the way that I've stepped into the identity and the role of being a business owner, an entrepreneur. Really for the second time, because I used to own my own practice, but I just did not have any concept of what it meant to own my own practice, own my own business, or be an entrepreneur in none of those skills. I don't know if you guys relate to this, but when I opened my practice, I just thought patients are just going to arrive. I don't know from where, but they will just come. And I also had so much self-doubt, so much anxiety, so many beliefs about myself as a chiropractor, and that I wasn't good enough and that I should just study more and take more courses. And so even when I would meet people and tell them what I do, it was sort of like with these caveats and like, but yeah, if you have this, I think you should rather go see this person. And, I wasn't really, trying to get patients in my practice because I had so much doubt about myself. And I just thought, okay, if I just develop myself more, if I just grow more as a clinician, then at some point I'll feel confident enough to step into that and realize that is not how it works. But anyway, so I had all of these kinds of previous experiences with having my own practice and how it didn't really go that well. And then I was in full-time employment for 3 years, so I didn't even have to think about that. I could just be an employee. And now coming back to South Africa and starting my coaching practice, or continuing, I had started it when I was still in the Netherlands, but now I had gone full-time into it. And so a lot of the kind of old struggles were popping back up again. And there was a lot that I had to kind of process through. And so that for me, I am so proud of the fact that I actually did that. And yeah, I was going to go into the what I developed from, but or like what didn't go so well, but that's actually the next step. So the reason that we start here is because we tend to, when we evaluate, when we look back at a time, we tend to immediately go to what didn't go so well. What were the problems? What was the discomfort? What did we struggle with? What happened, you know, in like usually the negative stuff. So this is why we start with what really went well this year. And you can ask yourself it like that. Ask yourself that question as well. What went really well this year? What do I feel proud of? What do I feel went really well? Where do I feel like I grew so much this year? And we really want to start there. Because then also the rest of the stuff has a little bit of a different feel to it. We're not, if we start with kind of what didn't go so great, we end up going into a little bit of like a hole. Whereas when we start, we're like, oh, actually, there were things that went really well this year. And we don't naturally go towards those things, right? We don't naturally think about those things. And what ends up happening is we're just always looking at where we can improve, always looking at where are the problems, always looking at how we can do better and grow. And it can start to sometimes feel like your life is just this self-improvement project where you're just always looking for what's not so great and how can I improve that. And usually not from a perspective of like, oh, I love growth and it's so exciting and I want to learn this new skill. It's usually like, oh my gosh, I'm so uncomfortable and this year was horrible and this time was horrible and I was so uncomfortable and I need to get away from that, right? So we're just starting at, what are you proud of? What went really well this year? And then we can go on to what didn't go so well this year. And here's the caveat with this. When we are looking at or evaluating what didn't go so well in any given period, right? I want you to try only naming things that you are in control of. So it's not because there aren't any other factors at play. It's not because other people didn't do things to you or that, the country or the world or whatever doesn't have its problems. It's not about denying that those things are real. It's just about saying, I can't control that stuff anyway. So feeling bad about that and feeling like it was terrible and talking about how it went so terrible, I really can't do anything about it. So when we are evaluating in this way, we really want to use things that we can actually shift, that we can actually change or have some control over. And so we want to look at what maybe didn't go so well and owning the fact that we had a role in that, whether that was just our response or whether we were actually the person doing that. But it starts to really shift the focus on what can I control. I'm in the driver's seat of my own life. I'm taking ownership. I'm taking responsibility. And it's not about shaming or blaming yourself. So we want to create an ability to look at where things didn't go so well, take ownership of our part in it, but not go down this spiral of shame and doom and gloom. So here are some examples that to illustrate what I mean, right? You can maybe say, or you might want to say, patients took advantage of me this year. Like, I really, like, that didn't go so well. Like, I really had patients taking advantage of me this year. Versus, I really gave past my limits this year. I really didn't enforce my boundaries in the way that I would like to have enforced them, right? It's like, clients kept canceling last minute and that's what went badly. That's not something that you can do anything about, right? What you can do something about is maybe you need to enforce your cancellation policies better. Maybe you need to manage your emotions around when people are late. And how, because most of the time, the thing that we're really bothered by is the fact that our emotions go up and down with patients doing things like arriving late or cancelling late or, telling us a new complaint towards the end of the consultation or something like that, right? So we are looking at our role and whether or not that's completely like taking responsibility for it or taking responsibility for the response, right? Because sometimes things just happen and terrible things can happen, right? So we're not trying to take responsibility for something terrible a patient did or something like that, or a family member or friend or something like that, right? But we can look at, how did I respond to it and how would I have wanted to respond differently? So for me personally this year, personally, professionally, I realized, especially at the beginning of the year, I was taking failure quite personally. So again, I was, like I was saying, I had sort of this previous experience of having my own thing, and my story about it was like, it didn't go so well. And so whenever I saw signs of that in my coaching practice, I would immediately go into like this, I would feel shame, I would like think I'm a failure, I would reinforce that narrative of like, you see, I'm just not cut out for this like business owning or being an entrepreneur kind of thing. And it really took me a while to almost like process through what had happened previously, and to realize that all of the things that I was struggling with were just skills that I needed to learn and develop. And that was it. Nothing had gone wrong. I am not, destined for like never being my own boss, right? It was just skills that I had to learn and develop. So I'd love for you to think about what these are for you. You can list these out afterwards, or while you're watching this, and just write down like, what do you feel didn't go so well this year? And as far as you can, just try and notice when you want to go to what other people did, and when you're able to look at, okay, what did I do that didn't go so well? Again, just because that is the only place that we can actually make any changes. Okay. And then the third part is, if you imagined this time next year, like let's say we did another one of these at this time next year, and I was asking you then, if you look back on this year, what are you most proud of? What went really well? What do you want to be able to say? What do you wish that in the next year or so, next few months or a year, what do you really want to say that you are proud of? In what way would you want to have developed or grown or changed? The other thing that you can do, this is something I often do with my clients, is what I call a future you visualization. So if you want to do this after watching, you can, or just pause. If you're watching the replay, you can just pause it and do this exercise. But you want to just kind of get into a little bit of like a relaxed state, just kind of deep breathing. Usually if you're trying to calm yourself, just think of your exhales being longer than your inhales. So just slowing down your exhales and you'll feel your whole body relaxing. You can do that in practice or in a visualization like this. And you're just imagining that you are meeting someone. I usually say like we're walking into a coffee shop and you're meeting someone there for coffee. And when you walk in, you realize that this person is the future version of you. And that can be 5 years down the line, it can be 10 years down the line. It doesn't really matter the specific time period, but just thinking of like that future you that you would feel like, oh my gosh, I'm so proud to be this person. This person is incredible. That future version of you, if you're meeting them for coffee and you're just chatting about, what they've done, what they've achieved, what growth they've had, how they feel differently to the way that you do, how they see life differently, what are their values, what kind of advice might they have for you in this period, knowing as the future you, knowing what you're struggling with now, and what advice would they give you? What would they tell you about what happens in the future? It's just a really nice way to get in touch with the stuff that we often know intuitively, but we don't really connect with that very often. And it also helps us to zoom out a little bit, to take kind of a bigger perspective, because when we are in where we currently are, especially if we are really struggling, it can seem just completely like it takes up everything. all the space in our brain is taken up by this problem. We have kind of blinkers on, we're very laser focused on this problem. And when we do an activity like this, where we step back a little bit and look at like 5-10 years, some future version, that problem all of a sudden becomes such a small part of like the bigger story. And so that is a nice exercise that you can do in order to do that. Another exercise that you can do is writing a letter from your future self. So let's say it was 28th of November 2025, and you were writing a letter to current version of you. And you can just write out whatever comes to mind. What would that future version of you want to say to you? And you can also use that like future version, like the 5 years or 10 years or something like that, and just writing a letter. And it's nice to write that out, and then at this time next year be looking back at that letter and to see what you wrote. I've done that once as well. It's such a beautiful exercise to do. And a lot of what I had written there were all things that I had actually stepped into in the next year. So it was at the time where I was considering leaving my job and considering a career change, and I was sort of starting things with my coaching, and I wrote a letter to my future self, and it was all about like really stepping into that and like owning that, and being willing to make brave choices, and all of those things. When I look back at that now, it's so cool to see that. So those are some exercises that you could do, but they all kind of have the same goal, right? It's just looking towards the future and thinking like, who is that version of me I'm becoming? And you can think about it in all aspects. You can think about it as like, if I were to imagine the future version of me as a clinician, how are they different? What kind of skills do they have? What are they known for? How do they see practice life differently to the way that I see it now? You can tailor it a little bit more towards like professional, a little bit more towards personal, whatever feels most helpful for you. And so for me, this is also for next year. If I think about like what I want to be most proud of, or what I would like to step into more in the upcoming year, it's more stepping more fully into my actual coaching practice and my leadership within this role that I have now. And then putting myself up for more speaking gigs, which is really exciting. And just in general, helping and impacting more clinicians in the upcoming year. So if I look back and see that I've done that, I will be incredibly proud. So here's really what I want to say about all of this, right? These are all kind of ideas that you can use to get a sense, firstly, of what actually really went well this year, so that you're not immediately going into what are the problems, what didn't go great, what do I need to change. So we are reminding ourselves of that, and then we're also using different tools to look at maybe where we want things to be different, how we want things to have changed in the next year or so, and further out if you'd like to. But whatever the struggles are of your current position, or whatever feels like that next level for you, that next level of growth or change, or something that you just feel is really uncomfortable, I want you to start thinking about that as, this is just the stage that my psychological development is sort of playing out on. So we all have our own play, right? We all have our own stage. For some people, it's a relationship crisis or relationship struggles, right? For some people, it's career struggles, feeling unfulfilled or feeling very undecided. For some people, it's exhaustion and burnout, and not knowing if they can carry on in the way that they are, right? For some people, it's a combination of these things. It doesn't really matter, and what I mean by it doesn't really matter is it's not about the details of what your particular struggle is. I want you to know, and I find it a helpful lens to look through of like, it's not about the specific things, it's about whatever the nature of the struggle is. The real work here is actually my adult psychological development. So yes, I might feel like this is really uncomfortable, and I might feel like it's hard, and I might feel like this is so unfair that I need to do this, and it might feel like I'm never going to get out of this, and it might feel so incredibly tough. But regardless of how you feel about where you are, if you start seeing it as the real work here is actually my psychological development, then you will almost see it as like a worthy struggle, or a worthy difficult, right? When we have stuff that we feel is very meaningful and worth it, we don't mind when something is difficult. And so it's almost putting on that lens of like, this is actually just me doing the work of developing into what they call an emotional adult, right? So we are, I speak about this quite a bit, the idea of self-authorship, but that is the adult psychological stage that most of us are transitioning into. And a lot of our crises, our existential crises or relationship crises, work crises, etc., are often just that growth edge of where we are coming up against our psychological limitations. So this is the difference, for example, of I want to change to a career that is more respected versus I want to become more comfortable psychologically with people not respecting me. I want to respect myself so deeply that I'm not looking for it externally, and I don't need other people to respect me, right? It's the difference of I'm going to try and find the particular city or community or country or whatever it is where I feel like I belong and I can fit in and it's my people, versus I'm going to create such a deep belonging for myself. I'm going to belong to myself so deeply that I can go anywhere and I will take that with me. This is the difference of looking to the external world to provide the things that we are wanting to be different, versus looking internally and stepping into that self-authorship, stepping into ownership. And yes, it might feel more difficult. Yes, it might feel more uncomfortable, but it really is, it's a different kind of hard when you're in the driver's seat. It's a very different kind of hard when you're in the driver's seat versus that you feel like you're just kind of being pushed around by whatever is happening external to you, whatever job you're in or relationship you're in or country you're in or whatever the career that you're in, etc., right? If that's determining your happiness, you have very little control and ownership. So that is the work for all of us. You might not love your particular situation, but if you just step into it and own it and say, this is where I am, regardless of how I feel about it, this is where I found myself right now. This is my life right now. And now, what is the work right here, right in the middle of my life? So this psychological development, this kind of through line through all of this, is exactly what I do as a coach. So yes, I help you when you're stressed and burnt out. Yes, I help you when you need to make a decision about your career, whether that's a big decision or a small decision. I help you when you're feeling, that existential crisis, or I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I don't know if this is the career for me, the path for me, feeling like your work doesn't have meaning or purpose, or whether you just up against that barrier of wanting to level up in some way in your career or your leadership or something like that. Yes, I help you with the details. So those are kind of the details of it, the particular stage that it's playing out on. But what's deeper than that, what's actually underlying all of that work, is our work of adult psychological development and stepping into that self-authorship stage of our emotional adulthood. So it doesn't really matter what kind of clinician that you are wanting to become, who that future view version is of that clinician. That is what I can help you with as a coach. So if you would like to talk about working with me as your coach, what I do is I set up what I call a consultation call. So this is an hour call that we book out. And in this call, we go through essentially like a history taking and diagnosis and treatment plan process. So I ask you a whole bunch of questions about what you're struggling with, other areas of your life, what you're wanting to change or how you're wanting to feel different, or how you're wanting your life or your career to look different. And then I let you know what I see from what you've told me as the steps that need to happen in order to to essentially bridge that gap between where you are now and where you're actually wanting to go. And that is what we do on the call. If that then seems like something that you would want to talk about doing with me as your coach, that is when we'll talk about the pricing, the logistics, how coaching actually works, what you can expect. And then if it feels good, we can make a decision on that call, but there's absolutely no expectation to make a decision on that call. So that is the process that I do with clinicians who are thinking about working with me as their coach, and they just want to know, is it the right fit for me? Is coaching the best option for me? And is it going to work for my particular situation? So if you'd like to set up one of those calls, you can just message me. That's usually the easiest way, is just to message me a few times that work for you, and I will make myself available for one of those times. You can just send me around 3 day or time combinations and say, this is when I'm available, and I will make myself available for one of those times. I also have, so one of the things I did from November to when I'm closing in December, I think it's the 20th or something like that. Anyway, just before that week of Christmas, what I created is a fun little bonus, which I call a VIP day, where we essentially do, there's like a menu of things depending on whether you are local or international. But it's a fun bonus where we do more coaching time. Sometimes you might have the option of, movement classes or something like that, breathing, meditation. But it's basically, if you do sign up before the end of this year, then you get that as a fun bonus with me. So that is just something that I created because I know that at this time of the year, we tend to push things off a little bit for the new year. And we tend to say, I'll start in January. Things will be calmer then, things will be better. But what ends up happening is it just gets pushed off further and further along because there are all these things that we put off until January. So it's just a way to kind of help you take action now and not wait till then. So that's just so that you know that that's a little fun bonus if you do sign up by the end of this year. So message me if you'd like to set up one of those calls. And I'd also love to know what you guys found when you did these exercises, both about your past year and then also when you're looking at the future version of you, the clinician you're becoming, the version of you that maybe in 1 year or 5 years or 10 years that you would look back and really be proud of and really love the person that you've become in every aspect. So I'd love to know from you what that looks like, and we can check in next year. And if you do write that letter, just save it somewhere, and then you can look at it next year this time. Awesome. I will see you guys for the next live session, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend ahead. Bye.